Samuel Brown was an 89-year-old veteran who carried his years with quiet dignity. Having seen his share of struggles, he always believed in the power of resilience. Each morning, Samuel followed the same routine, walking slowly but steadily to his favorite diner on Main Street. His weathered face bore the marks of a life lived through hardship. And though his body had aged, his spirit remained resolute. Samuel, a black man who had fought battles on and off the battlefield, had endured more than most. He had grown up during segregation, enlisted to serve in World War II, and returned home to face a nation that still saw him as less than human despite his sacrifices. Living in a small town where everyone knew each other did not necessarily mean he was accepted. The subtle racism that lingered in daily interactions made him feel like an outsider. As he approached the modest diner owned by Edward Green, Samuel sensed tension in the air. The diner was a simple place, known for hearty meals and a familiar routine. For years, Edward Green tolerated Samuel's presence with curt service, a simmering resentment behind a stoic exterior. Samuel had learned to read the insidious racism in Green's gestures, the clanging coffee cup, the cold sneer when placing his order. Yet Samuel never let these small indignities break his composure. He valued his routine. Coming to the diner was part of his day, a moment of quiet normalcy in a world that often treated him with indifference. On this particular morning, the diner was busier than usual. People chatted loudly over breakfast, and as Samuel pushed open the door, a hush fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the old veteran, a quiet reminder of a man who had seen generations change but still carried the weight of his experiences. Samuel greeted a few familiar faces with a polite nod, feeling the curious stares and muted responses. He slid into his usual booth in the back corner, hoping for the peace he had come to expect despite the undercurrent of tension that always seemed to accompany his presence. Seated by the window, Samuel ordered his usual breakfast. Lisa, a young waitress, approached hesitantly, her politeness tinged with unease. Samuel sensed the discomfort in her demeanor but replied calmly, "Just the usual. Black coffee and 2 eggs over easy." As she hurried away, Samuel noticed Edward Green watching him from behind the counter with narrowed eyes. The diner owner's agitation was palpable. Something was off. Moments later, Green walked over to Samuel's table. His heavy boots thumped on the floor as he stood before him, arms crossed and face set in a deep frown. "I think it's about time we had a little talk, Samuel," Green growled, ensuring everyone in the diner could hear. Samuel kept his calm demeanor despite feeling the weight of every eye upon him. Green's voice was low but edged with hostility. "You've been coming here for a long time, but I think it's time you found someplace else to eat." The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. Samuel felt the sting of humiliation but did not flinch. He had faced worse in his lifetime and knew that reacting in anger would only give Green the satisfaction he sought. Samuel replied quietly, "I suppose that you're right," his tone measured and steady. Green sneered, "Damn right it is. So why don't you finish that coffee and get on out of here?" Samuel slowly pushed his chair back and stood up, his movements deliberate despite his age. He made his way to the door, ignoring the curious stares, and glanced back at Green. In that brief moment, Samuel saw a flicker of uncertainty in Green's eyes, a rare crack in his facade, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Stepping outside, Samuel closed the door behind him, breathing in the cool morning air. Though the diner's tension lingered behind him, he felt a quiet strength. He had endured yet another act of injustice without letting it break him. As he walked back to his daily routine, he pondered the cruelty of a world that still held prejudice against a man who had sacrificed so much. Little did he know, this painful encounter would soon ignite a movement of solidarity and change in his community. The next morning, Samuel returned to the diner with a heaviness in his chest. He braced himself for another day of subtle hostility but found something unexpected. The diner buzzed with a different energy as he pushed open the door. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned towards him. But there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. Samuel settled into his usual booth by the window, trying to ignore the awkward stares. He could feel Edward Green's gaze from behind the counter, filled with disdain and reluctance. Suddenly, Green emerged from the kitchen, moving deliberately towards Samuel. The atmosphere grew tense as the diner's patrons watched the looming confrontation. Green stood before Samuel, his voice raised so that everyone nearby could hear. "You must not have heard me yesterday," he began, referring to his demand that Samuel leave. The room fell silent, the weight of Green's words hanging in the air. Samuel responded with calm determination. "I heard you, but I've been coming here for years without causing trouble." Green's sneer hardened. "It's not about trouble. It's about your kind. I don't want you here anymore." The cruel words drew gasps from the onlookers. Samuel felt the familiar sting of rejection and humiliation. Yet he stood tall, refusing to give Green the satisfaction of anger. He knew reacting would only escalate the situation. Instead, he maintained a quiet strength, focusing on the dignity he had cultivated over decades. As Samuel rose from his seat to leave, a tremor of resolve shook his aging frame. He had weathered storms before, and this was no different. Just as he reached for the door handle, a soft voice called out behind him. Lisa, the young waitress who had served him earlier, hesitated before speaking up. "Mr. Brown, I'm sorry. You don't deserve this." Her voice trembled with sincerity. Samuel turned slowly, offering a gentle smile. "It's all right, Lisa," he reassured her, his tone calm despite the turmoil within. He stepped outside the diner, leaving behind the cold stares and cruel words. Yet, as he did, the low rumble of motorcycles began to fill the air, a sound that signaled the arrival of unexpected allies. The approaching roar echoed a promise of change that Samuel could scarcely have imagined. The rumble grew louder as a group of bikers pulled up to the diner, their leather jackets gleaming under the morning sun. Leading them was Marcus Dawson, a graying leader with a determined set to his jaw. The bikers dismounted with purpose, creating an imposing presence that shifted the diner's atmosphere. Conversations hushed even further as patrons sensed that something significant was unfolding. Marcus Dawson stepped inside, his eyes immediately locking onto Samuel, who stood near the door still processing what had just occurred. Dawson then looked directly at Edward Green, who stood behind the counter with a mix of surprise and irritation. The diner fell silent, the tension almost tangible as Dawson's steady gaze met Green's sneer. "Can I help you?" Green asked, voice clipped as if bracing for confrontation. Dawson took a deliberate step forward, his footsteps echoing on the tiled floor. The other bikers followed closely, forming a protective barrier around Samuel. Dawson spoke calmly but firmly. "We're here for breakfast." His voice carried an edge that hinted at something deeper. He then addressed Green with measured words. "It looks like we walked in on something important." Green's eyes flickered with uncertainty as Dawson continued. "This man here, Samuel, has served his country with honor. And you, sir, have treated him with disrespect." The room watched as Dawson challenged Green's prejudice openly. Green attempted to justify his actions, but Dawson's calm yet commanding presence, backed by the silent solidarity of his fellow bikers, made it clear that the community would not tolerate such behavior. As Dawson spoke, the other patrons began to murmur in agreement. Emboldened by his support, Green grew increasingly agitated but found himself isolated. Dawson's words resonated with the silent majority, exposing the insidious nature of racism that had gone unchecked for so long. With each statement, Dawson not only defended Samuel but also offered a mirror to the community, reflecting their complicity in allowing discrimination to thrive. Samuel watched with quiet amazement as Dawson and his group stood firm, transforming a moment of humiliation into a powerful stand against injustice. The bikers' arrival signaled a shift. No longer was Samuel alone, and the oppressive weight of discrimination began to lift. In that moment, unity and courage combined to challenge deep-seated prejudice, changing the course of events in the small diner and perhaps the entire town. In the aftermath of the bikers' intervention, the diner's atmosphere shifted drastically. The patrons, once silent spectators, now voiced their support for Samuel. Edward Green, confronted by the collective disapproval and the looming threat of exposure on social media, faltered. The presence of Marcus Dawson and his riders, recording the exchange and standing as a united front, forced Green to reconsider his stance. The silence in the diner was broken by murmurs of agreement and calls for respect, echoing the sentiment that discrimination would no longer be tolerated. Green finally muttered a reluctant apology, his face flushed with shame. As Dawson addressed him, Dawson's calm yet firm words underscored that apologies without genuine change were hollow. His message reverberated not just in the diner, but throughout the town, sparking conversations about respect and equality. Samuel, though still frail in body, felt a newfound strength in knowing that he was not alone in his struggle. The solidarity shown by Dawson and the other bikers offered him comfort and validation. In the days that followed, the town of Millbrook began to transform. News of the confrontation spread quickly through social media and local news outlets, igniting a wave of support for Samuel and other victims of discrimination. Community leaders organized rallies and discussions, and local businesses reconsidered their attitudes towards inclusivity. Samuel found himself at the center of a movement that challenged long-held prejudices. People from all walks of life reached out to him, eager to listen to his experiences and learn from his resilience. The diner incident became a catalyst for change, prompting the town council to implement diversity training and promote inclusivity across the community. The once silent town now buzzed with a spirit of unity and respect, and Samuel felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. The journey that began with humiliation had led to a profound shift, a recognition of shared humanity and the transformative power of standing up against injustice. Samuel Brown's ordeal at Edward Green's diner, met with solidarity from a group of bikers led by Marcus Dawson, sparked a powerful movement in Millbrook. What began as a personal humiliation transformed into a collective stand against discrimination, revealing the deep-seated prejudices that had long gone unchallenged. The courageous intervention not only defended an 89-year-old veteran but also ignited a conversation that rippled through the community, breaking the silence around racism. In the wake of this pivotal moment, the town saw tangible change. Apologies were demanded to be backed by genuine remorse and commitment to change. Diversity initiatives took root, and community bonds strengthened. Samuel, once a lone figure enduring subtle bigotry, found himself at the heart of a movement that championed unity, respect, and inclusivity. His quiet resilience and the willingness of strangers to stand with him reminded everyone of the immense power of compassion and collective action. This story resonates as a testament to the idea that confronting injustice, even when faced with personal pain, can become the spark that transforms not only an individual's life but the fabric of an entire community, paving the way for a more just and compassionate future.